All right, so in this video, you're going to learn a little bit about how to graph with your TI-Nspire calculator. And so actually, I'm not even sure what screen my calculator is on currently, but a good rule of thumb to start out with is to always go back to the home screen if you need to start a new task. So we're going to highlight a couple of the keys here, and with the Nspire, it is a little bit different than the 84, and that a lot of what you're doing is actually done, on the kind of the main screen. So the first task we're going to do is we're actually going to talk about just getting to your graph and actually how you see it, and it is pretty intuitive here. Two ways you can do it. You can either start a new document and then open up a graph, but the easier way is to just select. So go to, I'm going to write down some information here. You're going to go to the home screen, and anytime I put the button here, it's kind of indicated that you're going to hit the button, and then select B, which is graph. Now on the right side here, I'm trying to take notes along with you in your notebook as far as like how you're going to get back to this information. So I'm going to go scroll down and I'm going to press enter, and it's going to give me a graph. So now I'm going to want to actually now enter equations into my graph. Now when I press graph, I get to the graph page automatically. In order to be able to enter my equations, to see that screen, I'm going to actually press the tab button. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight in a different color so we can kind of emphasize that. Whoops, there it is. I'm going to press the tab button. If it's not already there, to see space for entering equations. Now, when you enter your equations, the thing you have to know is that when I say F1 parentheses X, what that really means is that my equation, it's just a different way, and we'll talk about this in a little while. It's actually just a way of saying Y. So if I scroll, and I believe I can do this, if I scroll down here, you're going to see I'm scrolling through and the number is changing. That's just, I can actually type in, and notice the number is getting quite high. I can type in a lot of different equations. So the number is changing, and all you need to really think of this is it's just it's saying that Y equals, and I have to write the equation. Now my equation, I'm going to write this down as an extra note here. The equation has to have Y isolated. Equation needs Y isolated. Now, some of the equations we've done so far this year, Y has been isolated already, and some of them Y has you need to work to get Y isolated. So you need to be aware of those situations, which one is which. So I'm going to go ahead and type in, we're going to do the equation Y equals 2x minus 5. So I'm going to type into that space 2, and then I want to use the x at the bottom here, minus 5. And now to get the equation to show up on my graph, all I have to do is press enter. Now, if you are using the TI-84, you have to do a lot of different steps to get to that point. So from here, I see my line graphed. I see the equation. And what you can do, if this is in the wrong place, what you can use is your scroll here. And you could actually click and drag the equation to wherever you would like it to be, so that if it's in the way of something you need to see, it's clearly there, or it's clearly where you want it. I'm actually going to write that down too. So using cursor, you can click and drag that label. And actually, any label on the graph, when we start putting more labels in, can be done that way. Now, the next part here is we're going to list here window/zoom. And what we're looking at right now, our viewing window, you may be saying like, oh, I really wish that the y-axis went down further, or I wish the x-axis doesn't need to go all the way to 10. You can see these values here. telling you what the maximum and minimum values are on your screen. So if you wanted to change those, and when we are accessing different features of the graph, this is where everything is located. You go under the menu button. Here's all the actions that you may want to do with your graph. And what we're going to focus in on is two things today. The first being the window/zoom. If I go down to number 4 and I press enter or I scroll over, what you're going to see is different actions that you could take for your viewing window. Now, a lot of these are going to be dependent on the situation, but if I'm scrolling through, you can see the different options. The one we're going to focus on today, and the one we normally want to use is actually number 5, zoom standard, if you're just talking about a regular window. But the one we're going to focus on today, just to show you, is the one where you can actually manually set up your window, which would be window settings. So let's write some of this down before we get too far. So to get to the window/zoom, you're going to press the menu button. And I'm actually going to go ahead and highlight that. Whoops, I've already used green, and I've already used purple. Let's use blue. I'm going to use the menu button here, and I'm actually going to highlight it here as well. And the menu button, we then select number 4. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. Window/zoom. That's how we're going to get how to get to the window/zoom menu. So window settings, number 1. Sorry, 1. Oops, turn my pen off. Sorry, technical difficulties. 1 is window settings, is going to take us to where we can actually select how we want our window set up. So I'm going to go ahead and select number 1. And what you see here listed is the different options you have. Now, at the top here, or just to explain, X-min, what that is that's the smallest value your x-axis goes to. So that's the smallest x-axis value. So in other words, how far left do you want your x-axis to go to? X-max is the largest x-axis value you have. So in other words, how far right do you want to go? And the last one listed there, X-scale, is just your interval marking. So how often do you want so what kind of scale do you want to use? So if we select over here, that's currently, it's on auto, it's already selected, but if you change it, you can put, maybe I only want to mark every 2 spaces. Maybe I want my graph to go from -12 to +16 for some reason. If I do that and I select OK, what it's going to do is now notice the graph has changed. So now I have -12 up to 16, and then I have a mark here on my first mark, it says 2 to remind me that I changed the scale. Another way you can actually change your axes, and if I notice, you notice my cursor, if I'm scrolling around on the screen, different things are happening. If I see how my cursor is turned into a little hand, if I'm on the axes and I click and drag, or sorry, click and I hold it down, I can make my axes zoom in, and I can make it zoom out by just scrolling along. So if I wanted to change that back, if I didn't like how I had moved things, and it doesn't matter which axes you grab, I could again go back to the menu button, go back to window/zoom, and maybe I wanted that standard window, so I'd go back to standard. So -10 to 10, and it kind of makes it, this number must make it an even viewing window. All right, the last feature that we want to talk about here is putting a table on your graph, because you may want to see, and looking at this graph, it's not very easy necessarily to tell exactly where the points on the graph are. There's a couple of different ways with the TINspire that you can do this, but what I want to show you is the table feature that's under the menu. So we're going to press the menu button, and we're going to go down to the table, and we'll write this down in a second. We're going to go over, and you want to do split screen table. Now notice the second option here is kind of grayed out, remove table. If you want to get rid of the table, this is where you would come back to and you would choose remove the table. But if I press enter on split screen table, what it has done now, you see an X column here, 1, 2, 3, 4. you see remember this is y and it displays the equation. Here are all the different coordinate pairs, and so these are whole numbers, not, and if I went up on the table, but you can see the different values that are on this line. So let's write this down. We went to menu, and I'll come back and highlight it in a second. We went to 7, which is table, and we chose 1, which is split screen table. Now you can change the table settings, but again, everything is under the menu key when you're on your graph. If I go to table, I can remove the table, I can edit the table settings. So kind of explore on your own and see what you can do with it. But if I want to get rid of the table, I can remove it by going back to menu, table, and then remove table, and I'm back to my graph. There's lots of things you can do, and if you notice, like my cursor changes, I can move my graph around. There's lots of things that the TINspire can do that your regular TI-84 can't do. So explore, kind of mess around with it. Look under this menu key and see what can you find in there. If you wanted to just scroll along, for instance, trace here. If I want to do a graph trace, I can actually trace along, points along the graph here by just scrolling left and right. So if you ever want to turn something off, if you're doing that, you can always press escape. So I'm going to go back here. My last thing to do is actually just highlight to remember where the menu key is. And I'm going to highlight the other keys as well, just to kind of help me match up what I was doing here. All right, so that's a little bit of graphing.